In 1916, Carl Jung's house filled with the dead, and he wrote 7 sermons to quiet them. 6 were for the crowd. 1 was secretly about you. By the dead, Jung means everything in you that once went looking for meaning and never found it. You know the feeling without the name for it. You reach the thing you were sure would fill you, and something in you goes hollow. You can spend a whole life marching toward a light that never warms you, or you can receive what the 7th sermon was written to hand you. But the old book opens on a line that should stop you cold. The dead came back from the city they were promised, where they found not what they sought. You have made your own version of that journey. You reached the belief or person or achievement that swore it would fill you, and you already know how it felt. Start with what actually happened. The real story runs stranger than the occult version people sell. In the summer of 1916, Jung's house becomes unbearable. The whole family feels it. The air hangs heavy, as though the rooms are full of people no one can see. His children have uneasy dreams. And one afternoon the front doorbell rings, hard, with no one standing there. Jung writes that the place feels crowded to the point of suffocation, packed with a presence that wants something from him. He does not reach for a séance. He sits down and he writes. Over 3 evenings, the pressure in the house pours out of him as a strange short book in the voice of an ancient teacher, addressed to the dead. When it is finished, the house goes quiet. The presence lifts. Whatever had been pressing on him has been given its words. What he does not do carries the whole method. He does not argue the dead away. He does not drug them into silence. He lets them speak, and in letting them speak, he finds out what they actually are. The pressure inside a person lifts only when it is given its words, when it is heard at last by the one who spent a whole life refusing to listen. Denial does not move it. Neither does management or patient waiting. Now the part that matters for your life, not only his. Jung does not think actual spirits were crowding his rooms. When he looks at what the dead are, he gives an answer far more unsettling than a ghost. He describes them as the voice of everything in a person that was left unanswered, unresolved, and unfinished. The dead were never the people who died. They are the questions a person never let themselves finish, the grief no one completed, the self that was never lived, the meaning a whole culture went looking for and never found, handed down from generation to generation, still pressing on the living, still ringing the doorbell. The dead are patient. And the old book opens by telling you exactly where the dead had just been. They came back from the promised city, where they found not what they sought. Read that city the way the text uses it, as a symbol. It stands for the destination everyone agrees you should reach, the place you are promised, the meaning is waiting. For one person, that destination is a career. For another, it is a marriage, a certain standing, or the approval of people whose opinion they were raised to need. The dead went where they were told to go. They went faithfully. And they came home still empty, because the thing they were missing was never waiting at any destination outside them. The map was never the problem. This is the picture the sermons paint, and it is the picture of a great many human lives. A vast crowd, walking toward a bright, far thing they were told would warm them. A cause. A career you gave your whole life to. A person who would complete them. A version of success that would finally make the ache stop. They march toward it their whole lives, and the light it gives never once turns into heat. You are somewhere in that crowd. So am I. The sermons are not interested in whether you have been marching. Their question is what you have been marching toward, and why, after all this walking, you are still so cold. But before you can turn around, you have to understand why the pilgrimage fails every single time, no matter which city you march to or how faithfully you walk. It runs stranger and deeper than that, and it is the thing the dead never worked out. Follow a person who actually reaches the place they were promised. This is the cruelest part. You get the thing you gave your life to, the marriage you built, the title, the house, the number, the person. You arrive. For a while there is relief. Arriving is supposed to be the end of the ache. Then the ache comes back, exactly as it was, standing patiently in the new house you bought to be rid of it. The ache travels well. You know this feeling. It is the strangest kind of grief, because nothing has gone wrong. You did everything right and you still feel hollow, and the hollowness is somehow worse now because you have used up your best excuse. You always thought the emptiness was there because you had not arrived yet. Now you have arrived and it is still here. Change the arena and it plays out the same way. The person who spends 30 years chasing recognition and the number that means they made it, then feels the applause slide off them like rain off glass. One face can stand for all of them. A woman, 44, who spent her 20s and 30s doing exactly what was asked of her. The bright student, then the one who climbed fast, then the one everybody counted on to hold it together. On her desk sits a small framed line about the good life, handed to her long ago and kept without a second thought. She followed every instruction it implied, to the letter. Tonight she sits in a quiet office after everyone is gone, and the quiet is the only thing that answers her. She did everything right. These are not ungrateful people. They arrived exactly where they were told the meaning lived, found the address empty, and never once suspected the emptiness was the most honest thing that had happened to them in years. Arrival was the diagnosis. Jung has a plain, quiet way of naming what that emptiness actually is. He says a great many of his patients carry no ordinary sickness at all. They suffer because their lives have not yet found a meaning that has to come from inside them and never has. The hollowness at the end of the pilgrimage says nothing about which city you chose wrong. It tells you meaning was never the kind of thing you could walk to. And none of this is a case against faith or loving your work or belonging to a people. Those can be among the best things in a life. What the sermons refuse is only asking any of them to become you in your place. That work is yours alone. What you are starving for is not out there to be collected. You want to become the specific person you actually are, and no crowd, no city, no role can hand that over, because that person does not exist anywhere except in you, unlived. Jung spends his entire life on this one idea, and he gives it the name that is the real subject of this channel. He calls it individuation. It means becoming the one distinct person you were born to be. The way a seed becomes its own particular tree and not a copy of the tree beside it. The goal is the real you, finally lived instead of a polished or a higher one. And Jung is just as clear that this drive runs against a much older and heavier one. There is a pull in you toward becoming exactly and only yourself, and there is a stronger, more ancient pull toward dissolving into the crowd, thinking what everyone thinks, wanting what everyone wants, marching toward the same far light, safe in a great gray sameness where nothing is asked of you and nothing is truly yours. Individuation is the slow, lifelong work of leaning into the first pull while the second one begs you to stay. Every pilgrimage you have ever made to a borrowed answer was you obeying the second pull while telling yourself it was the first. You thought you were becoming someone by reaching the city. You were disappearing into the crowd that walks toward it. This is the mechanism that makes the pilgrimage fail every time, in a new city with a new crowd. You keep looking outward for the light, toward the thing the whole crowd agrees is the sun. And the light you were actually built to live by is nowhere out there in the distance. It waits as a small, dark star set in your own chest that you have never once turned toward, because turning toward it means leaving the crowd, and leaving the crowd feels like dying. But if turning toward your own star is the way out, the real question is why almost no one does it. Because the sermons are honest about that too, and the answer has nothing to do with laziness or sleep. The sameness works like a comfort. You have very good reasons to love it, and I want to name them without flinching. Do not despise the crowd, and do not despise yourself for standing in it. The sameness the sermons warn about is no kind of stupidity. It ranks among the warmest things a human being can have, and you reach for it for reasons that make complete sense. Being one of the many is safe. When you want what everyone wants, believe what everyone believes, and walk toward the sun everyone walks toward, you are never alone, and you are never wrong. The crowd carries you. It has already decided what a good life is, what you should want, what your suffering means, who to admire and who to blame, so you never have to face the terror of deciding for yourself. You absorb those answers so early and so completely that they never feel like answers at all. They feel like reality, and a person who has never had to generate their own answer to anything has never once had to become anyone. There is real comfort in that warm room full of people who agree, and anyone who calls it nothing has never been cold. Jung understands the pull better than the people who romanticize rebellion. He knows that becoming a genuine individual means stepping partly out of that warm room, and that it costs you something you can never fully get back. To become distinct is to become, in some measure, alone. To have your own star is to stop being warmed by everyone else's sun. A great many people feel that price coming and quietly decide it is not worth paying. They are choosing belonging over selfhood, and belonging is a real thing to want. The pull reaches everyone. But the choice carries a cost, and the sermons name it plainly, because they do not let you keep it comfortable. When you dissolve into the sameness, the specific person you are meant to be does not get to exist. Not later, not ever. The seed does not become its one tree. It stays a seed in a drawer of identical seeds, safe, dry, and unlived. And the strangest part is that you feel the loss even though you cannot name it. That low background hum of a life that is fine and means nothing. The flatness has a name that has nothing to do with depression or ingratitude. It is the ache of a distinctiveness that never got to happen, calling to you from underneath a life you built entirely out of other people's answers. You can measure how deep into the sameness you have gone with a simple test. Ask yourself what you actually believe, what you actually want, what your one life is actually for. Then count how many of your answers are borrowed. Count how fast you reach for what you are supposed to say. Under the borrowed answers, there is a silence where your own voice should be, and that silence frightens you more than you will admit, which is exactly why you keep it full of the crowd's noise. That silence is not empty. This is the thing the dead never learn. Under the borrowed life, in the place that feels like nothing, sits the entire unlived self, whole and waiting, holding its full charge. The hollowness was never a sign of emptiness inside you. It comes from the one real thing in you being kept in the dark your whole life, unlit, while you march toward a sun that belonged to everyone and therefore to no one. But if you think staying in the crowd at least keeps you safe and unbothered, the sermons have one more turn, and it is the one Jung buries in the 7th sermon, and it is the reason I told you at the start that one of these was secretly about you, because the teacher does not address the dead as a crowd forever. At the very end, he stops speaking to the many. He turns, and he speaks to one. 6 of the 7 sermons speak to the dead as a crowd. They are about the opposites that run through everything and the great forces a person lives among, strange and cosmic and easy to read as someone else's mysticism. Then the 7th sermon does something the first 6 do not. It goes quiet. It gets personal. It stops talking about the universe and starts talking about you. This is what it says, and it is the secret the whole channel has been circling. Underneath every borrowed sun the crowd marches toward, the old book says, each person carries a light that belongs to them alone. Not a light the crowd hands you, your own. It is the one point of warmth that is yours and no one else's. Call it the soul if that is your language. Call it your own true north. Call it simply the specific person you were born to become. What some would name in the language of spirit, Jung named in the plain language of the psyche, and the two are pointing at the same ordinary thing. That light was always yours. Strip the strange cosmic wrapping off that image, and underneath it lies the plainest thing Jung ever describes. The star is only its oldest and most beautiful name. The teaching underneath the dangerous old book belongs to plain psychology, and there is nothing mystical about it at all. The reveal does something quiet and merciless to your whole story. Every sun you have ever marched toward was someone else's. The life you were raised to want, the success everyone agreed on, the role you were handed, the person you hoped would complete you. All of it was a shared light, a sun for the crowd, and that is exactly why it never warmed you. It was never yours. And the whole time, set in your own chest, unlit and unregarded, was the only light that could. The seventh sermon has no interest in a better sun. It tells you to stop chasing the light the whole crowd faces and turn toward the one that was always your own. If part of you just recognized that light, you are not imagining it. Put it in the comments in your own words, or borrow this one. I have never once looked at my own light. A shared sun warms a whole square full of people at once, which is exactly why it never quite warms anyone in particular. Your star warms one person only, you, and it warms you only if you turn. Your own star was never a prize you earn at the end of the pilgrimage. You abandoned it to go on the pilgrimage in the first place. You walked away from it on purpose. Following it meant leaving the crowd, and the crowd was warm. You are one of the dead. The sermons mean it gently, as description rather than verdict. You have been the figure marching toward a borrowed sun with your own star gone cold in your chest, coming back from the promised city empty and setting out again, alive on the outside and unanswered underneath. That is a hard sentence to read about your own life. It is also the most hopeful thing in this whole video. Because the dead in the sermons are not beyond saving. Their whole problem is a direction. They keep asking the teacher, the crowd, the far sun for the answer, and it never comes, because it was never going to arrive from anything they were facing. The turn the seventh sermon asks for is absurdly simple and impossibly hard. Stop facing the crowd's light and face the one that is actually yours. It was never missing. It was the one thing you refused to look at. And this is what the turn spares you, running opposite to the occult promise people sell with this text. Your own star is small. It lights only the ground in front of your own feet. It asks nothing of anyone watching. It earns no applause. It makes you real, and real is quieter and harder and worth more than shining ever was, the one thing no crowd and no borrowed sun could ever give you. Every time you felt hollow at the end of getting what you wanted, that hollowness was doing a job. It was your own star refusing to be warmed by a light that was not its own, staying cold until you were finally tired enough of the pilgrimage to turn around. The hollow was mercy. The woman in the quiet office has felt that hollow at the end of every single thing she was told to want. But knowing you have your own star is one thing. Being able to follow it is another. And the sermons, along with everything Jung spends his life on, are unusually honest about what following it actually asks of you, which looks nothing like the sudden radiance you have been trained to expect. This is where everyone expecting a blaze of enlightenment gets disappointed, and where the honest work begins. Following your own star brings no lightning strike. No glorious morning arrives where you wake up changed and the crowd falls away and you rise. It comes quieter, smaller, and much harder than that. It is a direction you have to choose again every single day, usually alone, usually without applause. Jung spends his life describing this work, and he never once makes it sound easy. Becoming the distinct person you are, he says, is a long labor of separating your own voice out from the collective one you were raised inside, and it runs against a pull as old as the species. The star light's only the next step, so following it means giving up the far bright certainty for a small light you can barely see by. You never see the whole route. You only ever know the next honest thing. That is what it is to follow a star instead of a sun. Here the sermons get honest about the hardest part of the work, the part so many skip. Your own star was never only the flattering parts of you. It includes the pieces the crowd never had any use for, the wants and edges and refusals you filed away to keep your place in the warm room. Jung has a name for everything a person buries to stay acceptable. He calls it the shadow. Following your star means turning toward that buried material too. It means letting the parts of your own nature you were taught to be ashamed of back into a life that had quietly agreed to do without them. A star you only half follow, lighting only the presentable half of you, is just another borrowed sun with your own name on it. This is quieter and far harder than performing a better version of the self the crowd already approved. That is why so few people do it, and why the ones who do rarely look impressive. The work is invisible. It happens in the moment you catch yourself reaching for the crowd's easy certainty, and you stop. In the moment a hard question comes and your mouth starts forming the expected answer, and you say the truer thing instead. In the moment your life could be measured by what impresses the crowd, and you pick the small step your star lights, the one no one will clap for. None of it photographs. All of it is the star. And I will be honest with you about the loneliness because the affirmation version lies about it. When you turn toward your own star, you lose the warm room. People who love the version of you that agreed with them will feel you leave, and they will not always forgive it. There will be seasons where your small light is the only company you have, and the old ache to rejoin the crowd comes back. The sermons will not pretend you stop feeling that. They offer something better and harder. The small light is real, the bright one never was, and a person warmed by a real light, even a small one, is finally awake among the dead. Do not imagine you follow the star by force either, by white-knuckling your way into a new and better crowd. That is the pilgrimage again in a different city. You follow it the way you follow anything faint in the dark. You keep still enough to see it. You turn toward it when it is easier to turn away. You take the one step it lights, and then you stand close enough to see the next. The whole of individuation comes down to that turn, made again in the direction of your own nature, 10,000 quiet times. There is no single leap that finishes it. But it is one thing to hear all this and another to live it, especially far along a life already built entirely out of borrowed answers. So let me show you what the turn looks like in one life, at the age when a person is most sure it is too late. Jung is clear that this turn tends to arrive with the weight of a whole first half of life behind it, and that it is not a young person's easy task. The early years are for building the outer thing, the role, the place in the crowd, the pilgrimage. What comes after is the harder question the building never had time for. What was any of it for, and who, underneath all the roles, have I actually been? The people who never ask it do not fail in any dramatic way. They simply arrive at the end of a correct life and find it was someone else's the whole time. Come back to the woman in the quiet office, the one who did everything she was told. She has been the reliable one her whole life, the one who never let anybody down. She filled every role she was handed. She never once asked whether any of it was actually hers. What a life like hers was built around has nothing to do with laziness or stupidity. It comes down to obedience. She was taught, the way so many of us were, that a good life is a life spent meeting the expectations you were handed. She was never selfish. She gave each year to the roles, and they gave her a place, a schedule, and a name for who she was, all of it adding up to a self she could describe perfectly and had never actually chosen. That is the quiet thing the sermons point at. The danger was never in doing wrong. It waits in doing everything right, for reasons that belong to other people, without ever asking whose life it was. She almost did, many times. She followed the map to the last inch. And the mercy hidden in the sermons is that the star does not go out because you ignored it for 20 years. It only stays unlit. It is still yours, still waiting, still able to catch the moment you finally turn toward it. Tonight, in the office, she has spent her life keeping full of tasks. She does the smallest possible thing. She turns face down the framed line she never chose, the tidy saying about the good life that someone else believed for her, and she sits with the bare place where it stood. She does not replace it. She lets it stay empty. She lets one question be hers, in her own voice, for the first time in years. What did she actually think her one life was for? She does not answer it grandly. She lets it be hers, and for the first time she is not among the dead. And when the star catches, it does not make her special. That is the last thing the sermons protect you from. She becomes herself, which she had never quite been. The volume comes back on. The hollowness turns back into feeling, and some of that feeling is grief she owes for the years she marched, and she pays it. Becoming herself does not look like anything a stranger would notice. She does not quit or reinvent herself or announce a new life to anyone. She simply starts, in small ways, to answer for herself. She says one true thing in a meeting where she would have nodded. She keeps a morning for a question of her own instead of an obligation. She lets herself want something without waiting for permission. Each of these is tiny. Each of them is the star, throwing its small circle of light onto the next honest step. She is in her own life now, warmed by her own small light. And that is worth more than 20 years of a borrowed sun. Late is still in time. And once your own star is caught, even faintly, you finally understand why Jung writes a book for the dead at all, and why the ones who never turn are the saddest figures in it, sadder by far than the ones who merely suffer. Jung writes 7 sermons for the dead, and the dead were never other people. They were the unlived parts of everyone who ever went looking for meaning in a city instead of in themselves. 6 of the sermons describe the world the dead wander in. The 7th tells them the way out, and the way out comes down to a single turn. No further pilgrimage. Away from the sun the whole crowd faces, toward the one small star you have carried, cold, in your own chest since the beginning. You know which way you have been facing. You know the borrowed answer you keep marching toward, the one that has never once warmed you, the promised place you keep returning to empty, and underneath it, you know the small, unlit thing that is actually yours, the question in your own voice you have kept the crowd's noise on top of for years. So there is one small thing to do tonight, because the turn is always small. Find one borrowed answer you have been living by, one belief or role you never actually chose, and say, out loud or in one honest line, that it was never really yours. You do not have to replace it tonight. Only stop facing it. That is the turn, and the star does the rest. Before you go, tell me one borrowed answer you are ready to stop facing, or leave this and come back when the star catches. I think I have been facing the wrong way. And leave the star lit this time. It is small, and it is yours, and it is not too late to follow it.
Empaths aren't broken. They're alchemists in progress. The Alchemist's Path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com.